If there's one word gamers hate more than delayed, it's microtransactions. And the 2020 era of gaming has been plagued with games that aren't just satisfied with taking our money for the base game, instead wanting to continue to milk us like the cash cows that we are via microtransactions. So with that in mind, let's delve into some of the most downright disrespectful microtransactions to ever exist in games. Now, I'm going to start with a curveball here, as it's not a AAA hardcore game title, but instead one that millions of players were given the chance to play for free with a brand new PC, and that game is Microsoft Solitaire. Solitaire is a game that existed probably before many of you were born and was free to play for decades, coming pre-installed on Windows PCs. But once the Windows 10 update was forced upon us back in 2015, that all changed. No longer was this one of the most loved free-to-play games. Instead, fans were furious as Microsoft decided to add unskippable full-screen ads that would constantly pop up when you were trying to play the game. Want to get rid of these ads? Sure, no problem. Microsoft offered an ad-free version for $1.50 a month or $10 for the year. Yes, you now had to pay to play Solitaire. You knew this next one was coming. How could we talk about microtransactions without mentioning FIFA? Specifically, FIFA 14. This game was the start of the pay-to-win method in EA's FIFA franchise, with EA offering up packs in exchange for real money. The worst part? You weren't even guaranteed to get the item that you wanted. It was basically a chance to buy something worthwhile, causing many players to get addicted and pump money into the game with little to show for it. To add to this, keep in mind FIFA was a yearly release title too, so all of the money you spent on the game would quickly become irrelevant by the next title. This was not only profitable for EA, but huge content creators saw the opportunity and began promoting coin sellers that would do the work for you in exchange for real money, with people who had more money than sense building teams that were unstoppable thanks to spending their hard-earned money on digital cards. Up next, this one personally hurts, as I'm the resident Metal Gear fanboy here at GG Recon, so seeing Konami infect my favourite franchise with microtransactions felt like a personal insult towards me. Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain saw the introduction of FOBs, also known as forward operating bases, which basically allowed you to gain resources, house staff and more. The fun part about this was you could actually raid other players' FOBs online, meaning you had to think about your base defences and always be ready for a potential player attack. That is, of course, unless you wanted to shell out on Konami's fantastic FOB insurance. Ever the used car salesman, Konami implemented the insurance so that should a player ever take over your base and resources, you would lose nothing and they would just gain a duplicate, meaning your base was technically unaffected. This insurance was purchased via MB coins, which, you guessed it, cost real money, with the insurance being sold for around $3 and only lasting 2 weeks. Not exactly the best move by Konami. Now, onto a game franchise that has recently been revived thanks to its remake, Dead Space. The remake gave the franchise a ton of love, but that was most certainly needed after all of the hate they received for 2013's Dead Space 3. Not only did the game completely move away from the survival horror in favour of a more action-focused approach, but the introduction of microtransactions completely eliminated the whole, survival horror aspect the game was known and loved for. No longer would you have to worry about supply management when you could simply purchase whatever you needed for your crafting wishes. This really peed off fans who were already frustrated with the direction of the game, and this only further put the icing on the cake. If, like us, you live on YouTube, then no doubt you'll have been hammered by Plants vs Zombies ads at some point during your watching adventure, and in fairness, the marketing worked, as Plants vs Zombies became one of the most successful mobile games ever. But as is often the case in the gaming industry, devs see that success and can start to see more dollar signs. Enter Plants vs Zombies 2, a game completely ruined by greedy microtransactions. Now, don't get me wrong, as much as I dislike microtransactions, I don't necessarily hate them. If you want to spend your money on cool cosmetics, or just don't have the time to grind a game and want a shortcut, more power to you. But when the game basically makes the microtransactions a necessity to play the game like Plants vs Zombies 2 did, that's when it becomes a problem. Plant food was offered for a small price, which would give plants an extra boost of power, which in itself doesn't sound too bad, but they weren't an optional boost, they were literally a requirement, as fans felt zombie waves would become far too strong to defeat without paying for these microtransactions. This damaged Plants vs Zombies legacy and completely put fans off making a return to the once loved mobile game. Speaking of love titles, everyone's favourite lovable bandicoot known as Crash faced a ton of backlash following the release of Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. The game was tipped early as a serious contender to the titan known as Mario Kart, with the game getting glowing reviews on release. With the hype surrounding the game, the devs decided to try and cash in on this, introducing microtransactions to the game post-release, which really rubbed fans the wrong way. See, the issue here was there were already plenty of unlockables for players to work towards in Crash Team Racing, increasing the desire to play the game more. With this switch to put built-in content behind a paywall, it just completely changed the vibe of the game. Players no longer wanted to grind the game out to finally obtain that cosmetic that they were after, especially considering someone could just drop a few dollar bills for the same item. It really impacted the whole feel of the game and turned many players away from the franchise. Talking about this next one hurts too, as someone who grew up playing Guitar Hero 3. Now I think back, I think this was genuinely my first ever introduction to microtransactions in gaming. Not only did you have to buy extra peripheral instruments just to play the game, but Activision found a way to hook us in with having to pay individually for each extra song that we wanted to button shred to. Guitar Hero Live is where this situation got really bad though, as they introduced a mechanic where players were forced to play songs on certain channels, incentivizing players to play songs they weren't familiar with for the chance to play some of their favorite songs. Good idea in concept, but it was just poorly executed. Guitar Hero is very much a party game, one that people just want to pick up and play and get lost strumming along to some of their favorite tunes. So by locking the most popular content behind having to play every other song first, it just removed the fun. But don't worry, if you wanted to put the fun back into the game quickly, you could of course pay for that same opportunity to do so. As a basketball fan myself, this next one really disappointed me and, to be honest, made me completely fall out of love with the franchise altogether. The NBA 2K series has literally become the ultimate microtransaction simulator, even more so than the FIFA series, which is silly to say out loud. But every single element of NBA 2K incentivizes you to pay real money to progress. NBA 2K22 was the best example of this, as even compared to the most recent title, nothing has come close to just how bad that game was. Want to play online with your friends? No problem, but just to make you aware, you'll be playing against a group of 7'6" point guards with maxed out stats thanks to buying VC, so you know, you might want to buy some yourself just to level the playing field. Oh, is online play not your cup of tea? Fancy just playing through a career mode instead? Don't worry, they have that option too, and you'll even get VC for playing those games. The problem is, it's literally next to nothing, and you'll have to grind the game for literal months just to even get your player close to becoming a decent quality starter. Those are just a few examples, but the list goes on. Buying clothes for your player, buying loot boxes for the My Team mode. With this one adopting the FIFA method, you're not even paying for what you want, you're paying for the chance to potentially buy something you want, further incentivizing gambling. This for me personally is the perfect example of how microtransactions can completely turn a fan against the franchise for good. And last but certainly not least, the most recent example of horrendous microtransactions in gaming has to be Diablo 4. Diablo Immortal was absolutely hammered by fans for the disrespectful microtransactions, and early on in Diablo 4's lifecycle, it seemed Blizzard had learned their lesson. That is, until recently. Diablo 4 just released a mount that literally costs not only more than the base game, but $5 more than the Ultimate Edition of the game, which is just mind-blowing. The Vitreous Scourge mount can only be bought as part of a bundle, including the mount, its crystal and bone cage armor, 2 mount trophies, and 7,000 platinum currency, which retails at a whopping $64.99. Now, just to put this into context, the base game of Diablo 4 costs $41.99, and the Ultimate Edition sits at $59.99. That's right, a cosmetic mount that does nothing really other than being shiny costs more than the Ultimate Edition of the game you're going to use it in. I don't know about you, but the math just isn't quite mathing here in this instance. What do you think? Am I being too harsh? Have I missed out on a game that is infected more than the games mentioned? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you fancy some more controversy, why not go check out this video where we talk about why gamers hate yellow paint? No, seriously.